Fertilization is a complex multi-step process that is complete in 24 hours. The sperm from a male meets an ovum from a female and forms a zygote. This is the point in which pregnancy begins and leads to a 280-day journey for a female. During fertilization, the sperm and egg unite in one of the fallopian tubes to form a zygote. Then the zygote travels down the fallopian tube where it becomes a morula. When it reaches the uterus, the morula becomes a blastocyst. The blastocyst then burrows into the uterine wall, a process called implantation. Fertilization is the natural life process which is carried out by the fusion of both male and female gametes, which results in the formation of a zygote. In humans, the process of fertilization takes place in the fallopian tube. During this process, semen comprising thousands of sperms are inseminated into the female vaginal during coitus. The sperm move towards the uterus and reach the opening of the fallopian tube. The mature oocyte released from the matured Graafian follicle of the ovary and enters into the fallopian tube where it is fertilized within 24 hours. Though surrounded by several sperms, the oocyte is fertilized by a single sperm. Both sperm and egg can show their vitality only to a limited period. Sperm is alive for 48 to 72 hours in a female reproductive system, whereas the egg can be fertilized within 24 hours after released from an ovary. Once fertilization happens, the cell starts to divide and multiply within 24 hours in the fallopian tube. Cleavage is a series of internal divisions occurs in the zygote. Later, after 2 to 4 days, it travels to the uterus and now it is called an embryo. The embryo develops and undergo various stages and get attached to the endometrial layers of the uterus. This process of attachment is known as implantation. Fertilization versus implantation, the breakdown of both and when they occur. An incredible amount of things occur in the first week of pregnancy. We were going to break down exactly what's happening and when so that you will feel informed before you even get a positive pregnancy test. The conception timeline explained. Here a quick overview of the conception timeline before we break it down. It takes about 2 weeks from the start of your period for the ovary to prepare an egg for ovulation. If sperm are present when ovulation occurs about midway through the menstrual cycle, it's possible for one sperm to fertilize the egg, forming an embryo. After fertilization occurs, the new embryo has to travel to the lining of the uterus to implant. This typically takes 6 to 10 days. Once the embryo implants, it will slowly start creating the placenta, where it will eventually receive all of its nutrients and life support through the mother's body. At the same time, the embryo begins producing the hormone HCG. At least 2 to 3 days after HCG begins, you can get a positive pregnancy test. Ovulation and conception. When it's time for a new egg to ovulate, recruitment begins near the start of a menstrual cycle and causes the egg follicles to begin producing rising level of estrogen. Estrogen is the dominant hormone during the follicular phase of the menstrual cycle. Estrogen is responsible for thickening the lining of the uterus as well. Both are essential for a possible pregnancy. When the follicle around the egg has reached a mature size and the estrogen has reached sufficient level, it signals the brain to produce LH, called luteinizing hormone, which helps the egg to leak the follicle and ovary through the process called ovulation. There are at-home tests that allow you to test for surge of LH and know when ovulation is about to happen. Once the egg has ovulated, it could be fertilized by sperm and conception may occur. What is the fertilization process? Once the egg ovulates, it makes its way to the fallopian tubes. These tubes connect to the uterus, which is the egg's final destination, but it's possible for the egg to encounter sperm along the day. When sperm enter the female reproductive system during her fertile window, they have the ability to travel throughout the reproductive system to wait for ovulation to occur. That means that they can be found hanging out the fallopian tubes for up to 5 to 7 days. Try to catch that eggs. The egg only lives about 12 to 24 hours once ovulated, so time is of the essence. Thousands of sperm can be waiting for ovulation, and if they wait there at the right time, they will all descend on the egg in an attempt to fertilize it. But only one sperm can successfully fertilize the egg. When that sperm enters the egg, the enzymes change and an embryo is created. This is the fertilization process, also known as conception. When does implantation occur? Thousands of things have to go right for a pregnancy to be successful, but the first main event after a successful fertilization is implantation. Implantation is the process of the embryo burrowing into the lining of the uterus in order to attach for the remainder of the pregnancy. That's right, whenever the embryo attaches will be where the placenta grows and the baby stays throughout pregnancy. In order for implantation to occur, the lining of the uterus must be well prepared. While estrogen is the dominant hormone during the pre-ovulatory phase, progesterone is the dominant hormone during the post-ovulatory phase, called the lutein phase. Progesterone is responsible for stabilizing the already thick uterine lining and making it sticky enough so that an embryo can successfully implant. The follicle that ovulated the egg and produced the estrogen is now producing progesterone. Knowing your progesterone levels are sufficient during the implantation window can help ensure the lining of the uterus has been prepared to allow an embryo to implant. You can test PDG, means progesterone metabolite level, during the implantation window. This can even occur while the embryo is traveling to the uterine lining because it takes 6 to 10 days to make its way there from the fallopian tube where the fertilization process occurred. It is time to take a pregnancy test? Not quite. It still takes several days for an implanted embryo to begin producing detachable amount of HCG, the hormone a pregnancy test needs for a positive result. This is also why it's possible to have a false negative if you test too early. Signs and symptoms of implantation. If it's too early for a pregnancy test, but you were wondering if you could be pregnant, you could always have some fun looking at any signs and symptoms of implantation. We can't say that the presence or absence of these symptoms reveals whether or not you were conceived. When the embryo implants in the uterine lining, you may notice wrist tenderness, headaches, lower back pain, mild cramping, mood swings, nausea, and implantation bleeding. While implantation bleeding may feel like the easiest sign to interpret, it only occurs in about a third of pregnancy. So if you don't experience implantation bleeding or any of the other implantations symptoms listed, it doesn't mean you haven't conceived. It could mean that it's too early or that you don't have symptoms with your implantation. It's also worth mentioning that it's possible for the embryo to implant outside of the uterus, most frequently in the fallopian tube. This is called an ectopic pregnancy, and the location of implantation will restrict the embryo from growing and thriving. Severe cramping, dizziness, weakness, or the pregnancy that can't be found within the uterus may all point to the possibility of an ectopic pregnancy. If you are concerned about ectopic pregnancy, we absolutely recommend consulting your doctor. How to know you are pregnant? The process to get to pregnancy is involved and amazing, but by the end of that 2-week wait, you are ready to know one way or another. The easiest way to do this is by taking an at-home pregnancy test, which reads the amount of HCG in your urine. Doctors recommend waiting until the embryo has had time to implant and create HCG, which is usually around 10 to 14 days after the LH surge. If you see any color in the test line, it's time to call the doctor to confirm. Want to test all the important hormones when it comes to getting pregnant.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more.